Today is the feast of Catherine of Siena, and usually at Wednesday communions, if it's a saint's day, we learn something about the saint. Catherine was born in 1347, the 24th of 25 children, many of whom died. In fact, Catherine was a twin and her sister died not too long after birth. When she was 6 years old, Catherine had a vision of the exalted Christ with the apostles Peter, Paul and John. At 7 years old, she vowed to dedicate her life to Jesus, much to the annoyance of her parents. At the age of 16, her sister died in childbirth. Her sister Bonaventura died in childbirth, and her parents wanted her to marry the widower. She was determined not to do this and went into a strict fast. She also annoyed her parents by cutting off her long hair after her mother encouraged her to improve her appearance in order to attract a husband. Catherine was a very determined young woman, and later she shared parts of the secret of her determination with others, saying you need to build an inner cell from which you cannot flee. But it wasn't just stubbornness on Catherine's part, because she said that in this cell she pictured her father as a representation of Jesus and her mother as a representation of the Blessed Virgin Mary and her brothers as the apostles, and this helped her to serve them humbly and was a point of spiritual growth for her. She resisted the norm of marriage and motherhood, but she also resisted the life of the convent as a nun, and eventually she became a tertiary Dominican. As a tertiary, of course, she lived at home rather than in the convent. She stayed at home. Her mother, when Catherine became very ill, her mother went to the sisters of the Dominican order to ask them to take Catherine in and look after her. Within days, she was almost completely recovered, and she put on the habit of the Third Order of Dominicans, and she became a tertiary. As a tertiary, she had a religious life, but at home. So she went home, and I have some mixed feelings about Catherine, because one of the things she said about going home was that by staying in their midst, she could reinforce her rejection of her family. And when they offered her food, she refused it, saying that she had a table laid up for her in heaven with her real family. According to her biographer Raymond, at the age of 21, Catherine experienced what she writes in her letters as a mystical marriage to Jesus. And this was a vision of her being wedded to Christ, but she feels that Christ told her to leave her isolation and rejoin her family and to go out into the world. So this is what she did. She left her room, rejoined her family, and she began to look after the sick and the poor, taking care of them in hospitals or homes. In Pisa in 1375, according to Raymond, she received the stigmata, the signs of the wounds of Christ. But it was an invisible stigmata, so she was aware of it, but other people weren't. She soon found herself drawn into politics. She begged for peace between Florence, excuse me, between Florentine and Rome, and she asked for the papacy to be moved from Avignon to Rome. She asked for Pope Gregory to reform the clergy, and she went from Avignon as an ambassador of the Republic of Florence to make peace with the Papal States. This was unsuccessful, and she was disowned by the Florentine leaders. And we're told that she wrote an absolutely scathing letter to Florence in response. Catherine returned to Siena and founded a woman's monastery, a convent. She went on to a local mission of preaching and peacemaking. Then she began to write what is known as her dialogue. Early in 1378, at the order of Gregory the 11th, Catherine again went to Florence to speak about peace between them and Rome, and in July of that year, peace was declared. In late November 1378, with the outbreak of a dispute about the true Pope, Pope Urban VI asked Catherine to go to Rome, which she did, and she wrote letters to nobles encouraging them to accept Urban VI as Pope. She died in Rome on this day in April 29th of April 1380, when she was 33 years old. Wonder who else died when they were 33 years old. She had suffered a major stroke 8 days earlier, and her last words are recorded as, "Father, into your hands I commend my soul and my spirit." There are three genres of work by Catherine that survive. One is the dialogue, Dialogue of Divine Province, its full title. And it's a book, much of which was dictated to others while she was in a state of ecstasy. And it's a dialogue between a soul that rises up to God and God himself. It's also a systematic explanation of her mystical ideas. The second genre is her letters. About a third of them were written to women. And the third is the 26 prayers that remain, which she wrote, most of them in the last 18 months of her life. Catherine practiced extreme fasting, eventually to the point of living completely off the Eucharist daily. She viewed Christ as a bridge between the soul and God. She was buried in Santa Maria sopra Minerva. After miracles occurred around the site of her grave, Raymond moved her body into the Basilica of Santa Maria, where it stays to this day. Her head, however, was parted from her body and inserted into a gilt bust, and that was taken to Siena, where it still is today. On the 4th of October 1970, Pope Paul VI named Catherine as a Doctor of the Church, just 7 days after the same honour was given to Teresa of Avila, and they were the first women to receive this honour. Catherine remains a greatly respected figure for her spiritual writings and political boldness to speak the truth to power. And it was exceptional for a woman of her day to have held such influence in politics and in world history. As I say, I've had a mixed reaction to Catherine because she sometimes, like this scathing letter, she could be a great peacemaker. She could also be quite scathing. But what does this say to us? Well, she was a great one for church unity and went a long way to achieve that. So perhaps it says to us that we should look to be like her, at least in that respect, in her determination to achieve church unity. So your challenge for today is to think, what can I do to show unity between perhaps Anglicans and other denominations? What can you do? Perhaps just a phone call to someone of another denomination to tell them that you're thinking about them at this time, to ask how they are. But that's your challenge for this week, to find something you can do to encourage church unity. Amen.